Jeff Bridges starred in The Last Picture Show, and the Oscar winner from that same film was Ben Johnson. One scene involved a wagon accident, with 3 actors inside, being dragged toward a sheer rock wall, a dramatic moment in a movie that celebrated the gritty realism of the American West, the golden age of westerns. Spanning the 1940s through the 1960s, produced some of the most iconic cowboy films in Hollywood history. It also introduced audiences to legendary actors, one of whom was Ben Johnson Jr., more than just a film star. Johnson was also a stuntman, a rancher, and an authentic cowboy. Johnson didn't have an easy road. Like many in the industry, he worked hard to earn his place. But surprisingly, despite his success and wealth, there was one thing he absolutely refused to do. To understand that choice, we need to go back and trace how Ben Johnson rose to prominence. Born Francis Benjamin Johnson Jr. on June 13, 1918, in Foraker, Oklahoma, on the Osage Indian Reservation, he was the son of Ben Johnson Sr. and Allie Susan Johnson. His father was a respected rancher and a champion roper, so well known that the town still honors him with an annual memorial event. Given his father's reputation and strong roots in cowboy culture, it was natural for Johnson Jr. to follow. In his footsteps, he didn't just follow, he carved out a legacy of his own. Johnson became more than just a cowboy, became a legend, whose name still resonates today in both rodeo and film history. Growing up in Pawhuska, Oklahoma, Johnson's early life revolved around the cowboy lifestyle. By age 11, in 1929, he was already working at the Chapman Barnard Ranch, where his father served as foreman. At the time, it was one of the largest ranches in the state, spanning 100,000 acres and running up to 20,000 head of cattle each year. To manage such a large operation, the ranch employed between 10 to 40 cowboys at any given time, including young Ben. Along with his daily ranch work, Johnson grew increasingly involved in rodeo events, honing the skills that would define much of his career. Might have spent his life entirely on the ranch. But fate had other plans. In 1940, a chance meeting changed everything. Howard Hughes was filming The Outlaw starring Jane Russell. The production needed horses, and Johnson happened to be the man delivering them, straight from his family's ranch to the movie's set near Flagstaff, Arizona. Riding his own horse and driving the herd, Johnson caught the eye of the crew, and eventually Hughes himself. At the time, he had no idea this routine job would be his entry into Hollywood. But as the film wrapped up, it was clear Johnson had something special. Ben Johnson was tasked with taking the horses back to Hollywood after the filming of The Outlaw. Little did he know that his life was about to change forever. Howard Hughes had been so impressed with Johnson's expert horsemanship that he hired him on the spot. As Johnson would later say himself, "I could always ride a horse pretty good, and I was a wrangler going into business." Soon after, the young cowboy found himself signed with the Screen Actors Guild, beginning what would become a long career in film. At first, though, Johnson didn't jump right into leading roles. Worked as a stuntman and a double for some of Hollywood's biggest names, including Joel McCrea, Randolph Scott, Jimmy Stewart, Gary Cooper, and of course, John Wayne, the ultimate icon of the Western genre. Although Johnson eventually took acting lessons and would go on to win major awards, he remained humble. He often credited his cowboy skills, not his acting, for getting him into the film industry. In his own words, "I've been one of the more fortunate people in the business, been able to play Ben Johnson and make a living at it. Everybody in town is a better actor than I am, but no one can play Ben Johnson as good as I can." That sense of humility and authenticity became part of his charm. Johnson continued working in the background, never chasing stardom, but that was about to change in 1948. Working as a stunt double for Henry Fonda on the film Fort Apache, fate intervened. During filming, a wagon hitched to 3 horses suddenly bolted, with 3 men still inside. Johnson, waiting nearby on horseback, didn't hesitate. He jumped into action, chased the runaway wagon, and managed to bring it to a stop, saving the actors from serious injury or worse. Director John Ford witnessed the entire thing. Deeply impressed, Ford told Johnson he would repay him for his quick thinking and bravery, and Ford was a man of his word. He later offered Johnson a 7-year acting contract. At the time, Johnson had only hoped to land more stunt work, but this offer changed everything. And the money, it was staggering. Johnson, who had previously been earning just $30 a month working on a ranch and had made $300 for delivering horses to Hughes, was suddenly looking at a $5,000 per week contract. Without reading the rest, Johnson grabbed a pen and signed immediately. That contract opened the doors to real acting roles. No longer just a stuntman, Johnson was given speaking parts in films like Three Godfathers, 1948. She Wore a Yellow Ribbon, 1949, and Wagon Master, 1950. Slowly but steadily, he built his on-screen presence. A major turning point came in 1949, when Johnson starred in Rio Grande alongside John Wayne and Maureen O'Hara. The film featured a legendary Roman riding stunt that Johnson performed himself, along with fellow stuntmen Claude Jarman Jr. and Harry Carey Jr. They stood with one foot on each of two galloping horses, reins in hand, an impressive and dangerous feat that is still remembered by fans of the Western genre today. The scene not only cemented his status as one of the most skilled horsemen in Hollywood, but also showed that Johnson could steal a scene without saying a word. However, not everything behind the scenes was picture perfect. During this period, tension began to grow between Johnson and John Ford. Despite Johnson's tough and intimidating characters on screen, off-screen he was far more reserved, even gentle. This contrast sometimes clashed with Ford's famously abrasive directing style, and the two began to butt heads. Still, Johnson remained focused. His career continued to grow, but it wasn't just fame or fortune that motivated him. His real calling was something deeper, something he would fully embrace in 1953. But that's a story for later. Ben Johnson was a gentle spirit, through and through. Off-screen he was known for his calm demeanor and easygoing nature. A lot to make him angry, but that didn't mean he didn't have boundaries. In fact, those firm principles led him to butt heads with none other than legendary director John Ford. According to those on set, Johnson once stood up to Ford, a man notorious for intimidating actors, and flat out told him to go to hell. While the film wrapped without further drama, Johnson soon found out that Ford had taken it personally. As a result, Ford refused to work with Johnson for over a decade. But that didn't stop Johnson's career. The two would eventually reconcile and go on to collaborate on more westerns. In the meantime, Johnson was offered a new opportunity, this time by the infamous Bloody Sam Peckinpah, director of the 1969 Western epic, The Wild Bunch. The Wild Bunch shocked audiences with its unflinching violence and gritty portrayal of aging outlaws. It wasn't the kind of clean-cut Western the public was used to, and many weren't ready for its brutality. Still, the film became a landmark of the genre, eventually ranking number 80 on the American Film Institute's list of top 100 American films. Johnson worked with Peckinpah on 4 films in total, with the director deeply respecting Johnson's authenticity, cowboy spirit, and humility. But as much as acting was in his blood by now, something else kept calling him: the rodeo. In 1953, Johnson made a bold move. He stepped back from Hollywood to return to the rodeo circuit full-time, not just as a hobby, but as a serious competitor. Although he had always squeezed in rodeo events between filming, this time he was all in. That same year, he joined the Rodeo Cowboys Association and made an unforgettable impression. He roped and tied with a time of 12.5 seconds and a 60-point score, ultimately winning the team roping world championship. Johnson would later say, "I got in a position where I could afford to travel, so I decided to see just what I could do. That was the year everybody else had hard luck, and I beat them out and won the world. I came home with a championship, and I didn't have $3. All I had was a worn-out automobile and a mad wife." Despite his Hollywood riches, Johnson never took his good fortune for granted. He knew how tough the business could be, especially for those without a name. People are funny. As long as you're looking straight at them, they'll promise you a lot, but when they get around the corner and out of sight, they'll forget you. I've been fortunate, because I always had something else to do besides sitting around waiting for that phone to ring. I've always had a ranch, or someplace to go fishing. Though he worked with countless people in film, Johnson kept a tight circle. The most important person in it was his wife, Carol Elaine Jones, daughter of legendary Hollywood horse wrangler Clarence Fat Jones. The two married in 1941 and remained together for over 50 years until her passing in 1994. They never had children, but theirs was a lasting, devoted marriage. One of the few close friends Johnson had in the industry was fellow Western icon John Wayne, known as the Duke. The two became fast friends, close enough that Wayne once flew with Johnson back to his hometown of Pawhuska, Oklahoma, and later owned a ranch with him in Arizona. Johnson once said that working with Wayne felt more like a vacation than work. The bond was so strong that when Johnson's sister, Mary Ann Johnson Miller, died suddenly of a brain aneurysm at age 48, Wayne chartered a private plane so Johnson could leave the set of Chisholm and fly to Oklahoma for her funeral. Over the course of his career, Johnson appeared in more than 300 films. Some of his most memorable include Dillinger, Bite the Bullet, Breakheart Pass, A Rare Breed, Will Penny, The Wild Bunch, The Undefeated, Shane, Drums Along the Mohawk, One-Eyed Jacks, Major Dundee, and The Swarm. But despite all that work, Ben Johnson didn't become a household name until 1971 that year. He played Sam the Lion in Peter Bogdanovich's The Last Picture Show, based on Larry McMurtry's novel. The role earned Johnson an Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor. Ironically, initially didn't want the part. Johnson found the original script too foul and dirty, was uncomfortable with the language. Bogdanovich had to enlist the help of John Ford to convince him. Johnson finally agreed, but only on one condition. He would take the role only if the offensive lines were rewritten. Bogdanovich agreed. Standing his ground not only preserved his values, it led to the greatest recognition of his acting career. After that, the awards poured in. A BAFTA, a Golden Globe, and the coveted Oscar. Reflecting on how his life changed after the Academy Award, Johnson said, "The Academy Award changed my whole life. You win one of these Oscars, and once people think you know something. But the truth is, you don't know any more than you ever did." Ben Johnson once said you win one of these Oscars and at once people think you know something. So he chuckled at the irony. Don't know any more than you ever did, but they think you do. And so, the studios came calling with more offers and a lot more money. But even with his Oscar win for The Last Picture Show, Ben Johnson remained exactly who he'd always been, a ranch-raised, rodeo-tested cowboy who never forgot where he came from. On June 2, 1994, Johnson received his own star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. But the fame didn't go to his head. In an interview with Nancy Anderson of Copley News Service, Johnson made it clear that no award would change him. He didn't ask for a raise. He didn't chase leading roles. Simply kept doing what he knew, working with horses, staying in westerns, and living a life guided by tradition and humility. Some may say he could have achieved more had he embraced change. But Johnson didn't see it that way. He believed in sticking to what worked. The cowboy life had served him well. He saw no reason to pretend otherwise. Even as the Western genre began to fade from the spotlight in Hollywood, Johnson never wavered. Like many old-school cowboys, he disapproved of the direction modern films were headed. In an interview with The Oklahoman, he lamented the industry's shift towards shock value and vulgarity. They're driving people away from the theater, he said, because they're putting all this flesh on them. All these freaks getting up and using these four-letter words in front of their family. I just don't like that. I wasn't raised that way, and I'll die thinking the way I think. Still, he held out hope. If they would make a good Western and put people in it who knew what they were doing, and a director who knew what he was doing, then they've got something to sell. People would flock to it. It would be something. They could take their family too. After his wife's passing in 1994, Johnson poured himself even more into his work and legacy. If time and health had allowed, he likely would have continued making westerns. But in April 1996, his journey came to an end. On April 8, 1996, Ben Johnson died of a heart attack while visiting his 96-year-old mother in Mesa, Arizona. He was 77 years old. True to his humble spirit, he was buried next to his wife, father, and stepmother at Pawhuska Pusa City Cemetery. His mother, who lived to be 101, was laid to rest alongside them in 2000. Even now, visitors to his grave leave pennies and coins. On his tombstone, small tokens of respect for a man who gave Hollywood authenticity, dignity, and heart. In one of his final interviews, Johnson reflected on how he wanted to be remembered. Honest, real, with respect for myself and everyone around me. My religion is that I live as close to the golden rule as I can. I would like to treat people like I'd like to be treated. I would like to be remembered like that, if he could get that across to these kids, to just respect themselves and everyone around them. You could save them a lot of hard knocks. But Johnson's legacy extended far beyond the screen. After achieving success, used his platform to give back, founding the Ben Johnson Pro Celebrity Rodeo at the Lazy E Arena in Guthrie, Oklahoma. The event raised millions for two of his favorite charities, Children's Medical Research Inc. and the Children's Hospital of Oklahoma, in Johnson's hometown, never forgot him or his father. In 1952, just 2 years after Ben Johnson Sr. died during cancer surgery, the city of Pawhuska honored the father-son duo by creating the Ben Johnson Memorial Steer Roping Rodeo. It's held annually on Father's Day. Today, you can still visit the Ben Johnson Cowboy Museum in Pawhuska. Inside, you'll find artifacts from both Ben Johnson and his father, as well as memorabilia from other ranching legends and western icons of Osage County. One of the most popular attractions is a life-size buffalo figure, perfect for photo ops, that stands as a symbol of the rugged spirit Ben Johnson embodied. Ben Johnson Jr. wasn't just an actor. He was a real cowboy. One of the few who could truly bridge the world of rodeo and cinema. He helped define the golden age of westerns and left behind a legacy of grit, grace, and generosity. To this day, he remains the only person in history to have won an Academy Award and a World Championship title in rodeo, a testament to how rare and remarkable his life truly was. If you're ever in Pawhuska, Oklahoma, don't miss your chance to stand in the footsteps of a legend, Ben Johnson. Lived like a cowboy, loved like a gentleman, gave like a hero, and left a legacy as golden as the western plains he called home.